This was the world at the very dawn of time. Vast mountain peaks lost in cloud, mist rolling in from the sea, jungle that is hot and wet and dense. So Papua New Guinea is today, one of the most hostile, most unyielding land masses on Earth. A wild, broken country, splintered by river and forest, swamp and mountain wall, where just 60 years ago, the only way of travel was to walk. The Last Unknown, so it was called, in the Southwest Pacific Basin, north of Australia, stepping stone between Southeast Asia and the South Pacific. In the 19th century, Britain, Germany and Holland divided the island between them. Later, Australia acquired the eastern half and in 1975 gave it independence. A new nation, Papua New Guinea. They are fishermen and hunters. But above all, they are a village people, living by yams or taro or sweet potato. A way of life dictated by the ancestor spirits. A country splintered into 1,000 language groups, so that it was only when the Europeans came that a common language emerged. Pidgin English, literally business English, and the word for bird was Balus. Later, the newcomers brought a new kind of bird, a wonderful creature that carried people and their possessions in flight. And it too was called, and to this day is still called, Balus. What connects those small, isolated communities with the outside world is the aeroplane. The largest airline serving the small airstrips is Talair, and one of Talair's senior pilots is Max Parker.
The most important things to me in life are flying, women and horses, in that order. The first one will always provide the other two. Flying in itself is not a demanding profession, but it is rather isolated. In effect, general aviation pilots are, in the main, a one-man band. Have to make their own decisions. They have no crew or team backup. And this in itself is a challenge to a man personally. Papua New Guinea is probably one of the most mountainous countries in the world. Its weather patterns change very quickly, and that in itself makes it very difficult, quite apart from the airstrips. The airstrips are in the main built by hand labour, so in consequence are built in the easiest place for the people to build it rather than the most acceptable place for a pilot to land an aeroplane. The skills required in New Guinea are generally in the short field area. You have to be a very good short field operator. You're going into very short strips all the time. You need a very good look at them for a start because there could be pigs or cattle on them, and you might have to buzz them off before you could even attempt a landing. The strips themselves are very wet and boggy at times. Your approach must be at the slowest possible speed, with all the flap out and plenty of power. All landings in Papua New Guinea are maximum effort landings on these short bush strips. You are committed, in most cases, as soon as you turn on final. You cannot reject a landing on most of the airstrips because of the terrain surrounding the airstrip. A go-round is completely out of the question. The requirement is, of course, that you get on by the first marker, because any marker you leave behind you with the wheels off the ground you may need at the other end, and there's generally a bank at the other end, which brings you to quite a sudden stop.
The story of manned flight in Papua New Guinea begins in August 1922. A cargo vessel, the Messina, arrived in the harbour of the capital, Port Moresby, carrying two very small seaplanes, a short shrimp made in Britain and a Curtiss Seagull made in America. The expedition was led by a remarkable man, Captain Frank Hurley, already a national hero in Australia, adventurer, explorer and pioneer of cinema photography, among the first to use film to record his exploits. He later wrote a book about that epic flight.
The natives in their canoes were there in force, and as the seaplanes were towed towards the shore, they followed, circling round and round, manifestly filled with wonder and doubt. It was an amazing spectacle. The aeroplanes moving at the head of the procession, which contrasted the most primitive and the most modern methods of progression.
The planes were moored near the village of Hanauabada, and the Hanauabadans were fascinated, but no more than Hurley was by them. With his own camera, he explored their houses, built on stilts over water and connected by walkways. Their traditional dances and dress, and the quaint new customs they had learnt from the colonial rulers, the Australians.
A popular toy at once became the aeroplane, and I must say that in making such toys, the native children displayed far more ingenuity than the white.
"10 o'clock, September the 5th. Pilot Andrew Lang and mechanic Alec Hill make a test flight of 30 minutes over Port Moresby.
The machine taxied down the breeze and then about and into the wind. Lang opened the throttle and the engine roared its glad triumph to the skies, so that it sped like a graceful bird that skips the crests of the waves before taking wing and rose into the air.
But the first flight of any distance was the following morning. The plan was to rendezvous with the schooner Eureka at the village of Kaimari, 250 miles west along the Papuan coast. Hurley and Lang would fly there in the Curtiss Seagull.
The trip was exceedingly unpleasant. During the entire journey, we were harassed by rain, low clouds and heavy mists. The machine was tossed about wildly, And added to the extreme gloom was the knowledge that we had to find a small village on an unknown river with our fuel supply fast running out. Providentially, the rain clouds cleared and visibility improved so that we were able to locate the 5 great mouths of the Purari, which represented a wild and grand spectacle. We swept lower and lower, receiving many bumps until we came over the waterway in front of the village. The Eureka had arrived a few hours previously, and news of our coming had already been circulated throughout the village, and the people told not to be frightened. Huge canoes, filled with warriors, put off from the shore and began excitedly circling the Seagull, beating the sides of their canoes with their paddles until the noise sounded like the roll of thunder. It was a wild, barbaric greeting that welcomed us back into the Dark Age. The warriors were completely fearless, and it was with great difficulty that we kept them from ramming the seaplane and being cut to pieces by the propeller. To our bewilderment, Lang and I were obviously regarded as supernatural beings, and the machine became an object of veneration and awe. Shortly after our arrival, the chiefs made their official call. They came on behalf of the village people to make peace offering of a pig, and a very loud noise they made about it. Kaimari is quite unlike any other place I have ever seen. The world seems a long, long way off, and we feel as though we have passed beyond the portals of another planet, which have closed behind, isolating us.
The first manned flight. It wasn't the start of the air age, that came later, but it showed what could be done in a country too wet and steep for roads or railways. Now, there was another way. There is a saying in this wild country that there are old pilots and bold pilots, but no old, bold pilots. One who is old as pilots go is the Archbishop of Madang, Leo Arkfeld, born in the state of Nebraska in the United States.
Well, mission work in Papua New Guinea, I suppose, is different than anywhere else in the world. In this country, flying is a very important part of it. Missionaries just couldn't get around and do their work well without the use of the planes. So I've been active in this flying now for over 30 years. Been in New Guinea 36 years, and most of that time I've spent somewhat in flying, sometimes more, sometimes less. But it's the way we have to do it over here. Flying for me is a kind of an achievement. I suppose it sort of makes you feel as though you've done something, humanly speaking, so that you have sort of courage to face the rest of the problems of life well. If you do an ordinary flight somewhere and come back, you brought somebody back to his station, you brought him some goods, some cargo, and then eventually perhaps you picked up a sick person and brought them back. You feel, humanly speaking, you feel a sense of doing something good and achieving something. first stages of our mission work, I think the plane was a tremendous human kind of an influence that give us a good image with the people. I think it was a complete mystery and a tremendous means of gathering them together and influencing them. Oh, Mama. Little baby, all right? Huh? Yes. All right, you may go along house look now, huh? Go along house para pastime, huh? You fella, you shall be loose in Satan. No all get a work long in. No all get a talk grease long in. Now you all get it, you back him. Yes, me fella, you like loose him. All get him? Yes, me like me. On this fella Mike here, catch him Spiritu Santo. God, Papi, give him on you. Good fella time, no Lord, you start one time you. On this fella Mark here, catch him Spiritu Santo, God Papi give him on you. Good fella time, long Lord, he stop one time you.
But neither missionaries nor explorers like Frank Hurley ushered in the age of aircraft. It was gold. Gold discovered in 1926 at a place called Edie Creek. It was 70 miles inland, 7,000 feet above sea level, cold and wet, and everything had to be carried in by porter from the coast. You started from the beach and made your way inland crossing rivers, on into dense jungle, and up into the mountains beyond. Each porter carried a 40-pound pack, but ate half of what he carried on the 8-day march. It cost too much in time and effort and money, so in 1927 an airstrip was built on the side of a hill at a place called Wow, 2 days march and 3,000 feet below the goldfield. 800 yards long with a gradient of 1 in 12. So much air traffic to and from the coast that for a time it was one of the busiest airstrips in the world. That's a de Havilland 9, and that's its pilot owner, Battling Ray Para, one of the first pilots into Wow, a legendary figure much loved by the miners. Wow was the first inland strip, but it was Balolo, 1,000 feet below, that launched the most heroic chapter of civil aviation. A vast store of gold had been found on the river flats, but it could only be mined by dredges, each weighing at least 1,000 tons. How to get them to the gold, that was the problem. A road would take years to build and cost millions. The consortium formed to mine Balolo made a momentous decision. It would fly the dredges in piece by piece. One of the pilots was Norm Lennon.
Well, of course, I'm looking back 50 years now to that operation, and as a matter of fact, I had my 21st birthday at Lae then. And I look upon those days now with a lot of nostalgia, and I still feel a lot of pride in knowing that I played some small part or a minor role in the thing that was really something the world had never seen before.
The point of departure for Balolo was Lae. Everything had to come in by ship. Not only dredge parts, but fuel and hydroelectric turbines, building materials for a township, and provisions to feed and equip the workforce. The mining consortium, led by Placer Development of Canada, set up an air transport service, Guinea Airways, and searched the world for the best plane for the job. The final choice was the Junkers G-31, made in Germany.
It was the largest aircraft of its type in the world at that time, and it was a beautiful aeroplane for the job it was doing. It wasn't a graceful machine, but it was reliable, had plenty of power. It was lumbersome. It had a relatively slow speed of about 90 miles per hour, but it took off well with a full load, and it landed very reasonably slowly. It had no vices. Don't get the impression that the Junkers or any of the aircraft just carried solely passengers and pieces of machinery. I mean, everything required for the sustenance of life and for the building of anything from a biscuit tin to an aircraft hangar had to be carried by aircraft. Nails, screws, wire, everything to ice cream, cattle, horses. Comparing the aircraft of today with the Junkers in those days, it's not the same, really. The way I feel about it, the open cockpit aircraft have a romance about them, that same as the old sailing ships did, or the old steam locomotive did. But with this progress of technology and so forth, this has all gone by the board, and we can slash times and everything in modern aircraft, but it leaves something lacking, the thrill of flying. In the Junkers, for example, we had 3 engines of 9 cylinders each with open exhaust pipes about 12 inches long, and that was 27 exhaust pipes belching in your ears and the wind howling around your cheekbones and flapping you, and that was a thrill in flying.
Guinea Airways chalked up all kinds of world records in those early years. Remember that the air cargo industry was still in its infancy. In the late 1920s and early 30s, planes flying from Lae into Wau and Balolo carried more air freight each year than the rest of the world combined. To build that first dredge, the hydroelectric turbine and the township for the workforce took 2,500 tons of air cargo. Over the next 8 years, another 7 dredges and 2 more power plants would follow. Every last nut and bolt brought in by plane. The first dredge is open, a grand occasion. That's Charles Banks, Managing Director of Placer Development. And there, with a bottle of champagne, his wife Jean. His Honour, the Administrator of New Guinea, General Ivan Alexander Wisdom, made the keynote speech.
It would seem as though some musician had waved a wand and given the fiat, let there be gold, and there was gold. Let there be aeroplanes, and there were aeroplanes. Let there be a dredge, and there was a dredge. Let there be a happy community of workers, and there is one. This is, for the territory, an epoch-making event. Not the least part of the difficulty was overcome by Guinea Airways, whose work stands out as the most stupendous air service performance done anywhere in the world up to the present.
Where gold was crucial to New Guinea in the 30s, today it is copper. And what the fixed-wing aircraft was to mineral exploration then, today it is the helicopter. A large deposit of copper ore, some 400 million tons, has been found in the remote northwest at a place called Freda River, and a massive survey is underway to establish the size and quality of the ore body. The chief pilot on the project is Neil O'Connor.
Our main task here at the moment is to drill this deposit, and by drilling we're going down into the rock, bringing out a core of rock with the drills, and this core is then broken up. It's packed into bags and sent down to our laboratory in Madang for analysis, and these results come back to the geologists, so they know that, well, there's no point going any further in that direction, it's running out, so we move here. And we find that frequently we have to move that drill every 2 or 3 days. They're so efficient and they really get on with the job. Without aircraft, it'd be well-nigh impossible to carry out this work here. It would take even a local good bushman 2 days to walk what we can fly in 6 or 7 minutes. And it's pretty obvious that the aircraft is a very essential part of this whole operation. It is dangerous country in as much as if you had the misfortune to have an engine failure, you're certainly going to write off the helicopter because you'll finish up in the jungle or you're going to finish up in a rocky bed of a creek. Mind you, I'd rather be in a helicopter than anything else because you're going to arrive back on top of the trees or in the creek at 0 forward speed and 0 vertical speed and just slowly sink in. And lots of people have been in this situation in Papua New Guinea where they've had to put a helicopter into the jungle. In 99 cases out of 100, they've walked away from it with only a few scratches and bruises. From that point of view, it's the safest way to transport anything in Papua New Guinea, in my opinion. Either that or have a twin-engine fixed-wing, and if one packs up, well, you still have the other engine to fly you somewhere. I take my hat off to these fellows that fly around New Guinea on a single-engine aircraft, because if it quits, man, you've got problems. We have our own airstrip on the Freda River, just in from the swamp country and the foothills, as far as the boats can get up. And then we do bring a lot of perishables or urgent supplies, personnel, all come in on a fixed wing to that airstrip. But then you have another 26 kilometres of rising ground, heavily covered with jungle, and we have to get personnel and equipment, everything up into the area where we're operating, the ore body. Without the helicopter, it's just not possible to lift that equipment in there. Everything we have here in the camp, from roofing iron to nails to concrete to food, absolutely everything comes in hanging underneath the helicopter.
Roger, okay, copy it, okay. You and Jetty, anything else?
Jacker on the pump will be coming down this morning. Can you let Roy know that they'll be down pretty early?
Right, copy it, okay. I'll let Roy know about that.
So, mate, have you still got any samples down there?
Right, 5 tips.
Yeah, I might get them on, I don't know. We'll see what happens, all right?
Roger. Yeah, right, okay.
The community life here is quite an interesting one because there's very little friction at all. The people who go up to make the community here are mostly Papua New Guineans. And when we first came here 10 years ago, many of these people had had very little contact with the outside world. We have people from Austria, we have people from Holland, we have people from Japan because, well, the Japanese are now part of this show. And they come and go, might do a stint here for a couple of years.